welcome to the colloquium conversation this afternoon on pricing carbon to combat climate change. What can we learn from British Columbia? As you all know, climate change is one of the grand challenges facing us as a global society today, and we're looking for ways to reverse the trend we have underway today. And one of the primary mechanisms under discussion is some kind of a price on carbon. British Columbia has been successful in implementing such a plan, and we hope to learn a lot about that this afternoon, and how we might in the U.S. benefit from what British Columbia has learned.
To get us started, and let me introduce myself first. I'm Bob Armstrong. I'm director of the MIT Energy Initiative, a group that works with about a third of the campus here at MIT in transforming the world's energy systems by bringing together technology, policy, and economics. To get us started, I'd like to introduce Professor Cynthia Barnhart. She is the Chancellor of MIT and also a civil and environmental engineering professor. She's done research in optimization and in transportation planning and strategies. She's very well known in her field and is a member of the National Academy of Engineering. Cindy, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, Bob, for that introduction. And thanks to Climate Exchange for reaching out to MIT, and to the MIT Energy Initiative, and the MIT Center for Energy and Environmental Policy Research for hosting this important event. An event that is central to our ongoing conversation here at MIT about climate change mitigation. We're honored to have with us today a number of dignitaries, including the delegation from British Columbia, which is a front-runner jurisdiction with actual practical experience in carbon pricing, and Massachusetts State Senator Michael Barrett, who recently introduced a bill in the state legislature to adopt a carbon fee and rebate program. So to allow what promises to be an interesting and engaging colloquium to begin, let me introduce our keynote speaker, British Columbia's Parliamentary Secretary, Mike Bernier. Parliamentary Secretary Bernier was elected member of the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia for Peace River South in 2013, and in 2014, he was appointed as Parliamentary Secretary for Energy, Literacy, and the Environment for the Minister of Environment. Prior to this, as mayor of the town of Dawson Creek, he became active in clean energy and climate action policy at both the municipal and the provincial level. In 2008, he assisted then Premier Campbell in organizing support for and passing the carbon tax. He has also served on the Mayor's Climate Leadership Council and the Green Energy Advisory Task Force, and was chair of the Community Energy Association. He has lived in Dawson Creek since 1993 and has 20 years of experience in the natural gas industry. I'm very pleased to welcome to MIT Parliamentary Secretary Mike Bernier.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for that warm welcome, and thanks for that bio readout. So, I think the only thing that was missing off of that bio was I have 5 children, I'm married, and I like long walks along a beach in the sunset. So other than that, I think we got everything else covered, so thank you very much. It's a real honor to be here, as I mentioned. I want to start off by thanking everybody here in Boston and the rest of the state officials here in Massachusetts for such an amazing warm welcome and the hospitality that you've shown us, myself and the rest of the group that's traveled here from British Columbia. As you know, and it's unfortunate, Minister Mary Polak, who was supposed to be coming here, for some of you who might follow the media, we had an unfortunate oil spill on the coast of British Columbia a couple of days ago. You can appreciate that the Premier and the minister had to focus their attentions to that. On a good note, it was quite a minor spill, and it was 100% cleaned up, but because of the proximity to Vancouver, it lent itself to a lot of attention that the Premier and them needed to be at. So it's really exciting for myself to be here today and a pleasure to speak to you about carbon pricing. It's something that I've been doing for quite a while, something I've been involved with for quite a while. So when we look at carbon pricing, so whether it's a revenue-neutral carbon tax, a cap-and-trade system,
most important
fee,
policy
dividend approach,
shift that we had to make was a
or a
meaningful
combination of
price
any of these. It
on
really doesn't matter which one. Each of these are a critical component to looking at effective action on climate change. It accounts in costs and the impacts of carbon pollution that we're seeing now and into the future. It supports investment in technologies, and it helps us when we need to look at transitioning to a low-carbon economy. Climate change right now, as you can appreciate, is widely recognized as the largest environmental threat facing us globally. In my home province of British Columbia, we've already seen and lost millions of dollars because of what the devastation we've had in our forest sector around the the pine beetle that we've had that's gone through and ravaged our forest sector. So we're seeing this. That wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for climate change. We also look at extreme weather events that are threatening our coastline, the health and safety impacts that are affecting our citizens, and the stressed infrastructure that we have that's going to be costing millions of dollars to upgrade. So BC has shown leadership in standing up to the threat around climate change. In fact, we've committed to reducing our emissions to 33% below 2007 and 80% below our 2050 marks. We've successfully reached our first interim target, which we're very happy to talk about, that was set, and that was 6% below our 2007 targets by 2012. We've been clear from the outset that more actions need to be made, and our legislated targets in 2020 and 2050, we're looking at those and currently exploring options for updating our climate action plans, hoping to make some announcements really soon on the next steps that we're going to be making. British Columbia's cornerstone climate policy is an economy-wide price on carbon applied through a revenue-neutral carbon tax on all fossil fuels that are purchased in the province. The carbon tax actually covers 72% of BC's greenhouse gas emissions. So by designing this revenue-neutral tax, BC is sending a price signal that shifts taxation from what we want, which is income and investment in our province, to what we don't want, which is carbon pollution. The tax actually underpins the success of the suite of other climate actions in our plan, and is key to driving progress towards a low-carbon economy and energy efficiency within our province. So as you may have heard, our carbon tax was actually established in 2008 as part of our province's climate action plan. And the leaders of the day, Premier Gordon Campbell and others, recognized that the single most important policy shift that we had to make was a meaningful price on carbon. We looked at doing this, and what we succeeded in was a tax that was efficient to implement, it was simple, and it was complementary to our existing tax infrastructure, and most importantly, it was easy to understand. It's resulted in very little administrative costs or burdens actually to the administration as well. The BC carbon tax was the first and is still one of the most comprehensive carbon tax in all of North America. What we found, which is really important around this, is it sends a consistent price signal to allow the market themselves to decide the best ways that they can reduce emissions. Through this price signal, individual businesses, individual citizens, and the industries that we have are encouraged to use less fossil fuels and obviously reduces their emissions. The tax also makes clean energy alternatives in our province more economically attractive. The certainty provided by BC's carbon price via our carbon tax helps new industries to make investment decisions within our jurisdiction. And I know in a few moments when we get to the panel discussion, you're going to hear from some of the experts here, and we're going to talk about some of those changes that we've seen in our province because of the carbon tax. So the carbon tax, when it was implemented, we started at a low number. We started at $10 per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent to begin with, and then we increased it $5 a year after that to where we're at now, which is $30 per ton for carbon dioxide equivalent. To put that into perspective, what that means for us in British Columbia, it works out to about 7 cents for a liter of gas, 24 cents a gallon, if you're looking at the gasoline specifically of what that carbon tax has added. So for us, what was really important when we designed this tax was to ensure that it was revenue neutral. This means that for every dollar that we're collecting into our coffers because of the carbon tax, that is completely going back out in the form of targeted tax cuts that we've implemented in our province. In 2014-15, in our last budget, we actually generated $1.2 billion off the carbon tax in our province. And every dollar that we created out of that, as I said, went back into businesses and families. What we found, which is really exciting through this, is even though we've done this tax, and yes, we call it a tax, and some will say, tax is a 4-letter word, but what's really important through this and through being revenue neutral, at the same time, while we've done this, we've actually been able to keep the lowest corporate income tax rates in the G7. And when all the taxes are considered for British Columbia, we actually still have some of the lowest tax burdens in all of Canada. This, we like to think, is actually part of the carbon tax, that it's actually played a major role in accomplishing this. Our carbon tax was also designed to protect low-income families who are the least able to absorb the costs of an additional levy or additional tax, and they're also the least able to benefit from the cuts in personal income taxes. So a BC low-income climate action tax credit is available now for approximately 1 million citizens in British Columbia. The credit provides an annual maximum return of just over $115 a year per adult and $34.50 a year per child. When we did some independent research around the carbon tax, if it's maintained in its current form that we have right now, what we found was that every household in British Columbia will be better off in 2020 by around $121 a year. So they're better off even with the carbon tax. An independent research that was done by the University of Ottawa has also found that since we've implemented the tax in British Columbia, our fuel use has gone down by 16%. And that's just in the last 6-7 years. But when you look at the rest of Canada, the actual fuel has gone up by around 3%. What's really important for us to also stress, since we've implemented the carbon tax, is how it's actually helped our economy. Between 2007 and 2013, after we implemented the carbon tax, our real GDP has actually gone up by over 9.2%. That's more than actually the Canadian average. And at the same time, we're going through huge growth in our province. So our citizens and industry, the amount of growth we have is incredible. And with our GDP going up, it's obviously a success story that you can have both. What we've said is that our carbon tax is going to remain in the current rate and scope until other jurisdictions start to implement and look at other ways of pricing carbon. BC specifically, we're actually a relatively small economy, and most other jurisdictions have not yet followed what we're doing in BC on pricing carbon as we have hoped. And that's why it's really exciting to be here in Massachusetts, to be here in Boston, to hear about the developments you've made, to hear about the progress that you've been making, and more importantly, really encouraged with the discussions we've had today with Senator Barrett and other members and other colleagues of his, the leadership that's being shown here. And I want to commend you and congratulate you again on that for what you're doing. So British Columbia's climate actions have included a number of market-based and other policy tools in incentivizing the transition to a low-carbon economy. We championed and developed a regional cap-and-trade program with California and 9 other states and provinces as a means of encouraging additional jurisdictions to include carbon pricing, to follow our lead. We introduced a limited emissions trading system as a flexible approach to regulating the liquefied natural gas sector, which we have as well, in addition to the carbon tax. Because one of the things we want to talk about is as we move forward with an LNG sector, that's only going to happen as we promote the cleanest LNG in the world. So I'll touch on a few things. How have we reached this? How have we actually gone through some of our reductions? Well, our government first decided that we had to show leadership internally and demonstrate that. So all of our government operations, our public schools, our universities, our hospitals are all required to be carbon neutral. That includes through purchasing carbon offsets where needed as well. Around our transportation systems, we provided incentives to purchase clean energy vehicles and invest in clean energy vehicle infrastructure. They've provided directly to consumers money and offsets through our Utilities Commission that we have in British Columbia. We've also deployed the largest electric vehicle charging network in all of Canada in British Columbia, and we have the most electric vehicles per capita in British Columbia compared to anywhere else in Canada. In addition, one of the things we put into legislation was that carbon content for all vehicle fuels must be reduced by 2020 by 10%. For energy, by legislation, 93% of BC's electric generation must come from clean, renewable energy sources. And to date now, we're achieving almost 97% of our electricity being generated by clean electricity. Energy efficiency and conservation are encouraged through the adoption of minimum energy performance standards. Some of them you refer to LEED for the build-out side of things, for public buildings, appliance standards, and through our building codes. One of the things I think has been really important that we've learned and what brought us along is you can't do it alone. It can't be done necessarily by a top-down level of government approach. So one of the successes we've found is including local governments. 93% of local governments have signed on to the Climate Action Charter that we implemented, which commits them as local governments to work towards becoming carbon neutral as well. And it helps them create plans building compact, safe communities. In fact, when I was the mayor of Dawson Creek, as was mentioned when I was introduced, I was really proud of the fact that the city of Dawson Creek took that to heart. We were one of the first signatories of the Climate Action Plan. We were one of the first Canadas in North America, one of the first cities in North America to be actually identified as a carbon neutral city. So that was something that was a little feather in the cap for us, something that we're really proud of. And as a government now, to help other local governments and signatories to this charter, what we've done is we've implemented a grant through the province, equivalent to the cost of their carbon tax. So as municipalities start looking at what their carbon outputs are, and they report those, as long as they follow the steps that we've put in under the plan, the province actually rebates the cities and municipalities the equivalent of what they spent in carbon tax. And what's happened is the cities have then used that money that they've received and put it into further carbon reduction opportunities. So it's been we say a reverse snowball, melting snowball effect every year. One thing that's been exciting for British Columbia, and maybe it's the reason why we're here today, is what we've been doing in British Columbia has not gone unnoticed. It's something we're very proud of, the reputation that we've gained. Prominent articles that we've seen in the Economist magazine, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times have all pointed the success of the policies of British Columbia at how it's been successful at the same time of growing our economy. So an important principle to BC's approach to climate action, as I was talking about, not only with municipalities but with others, is collaboration. We can all agree, I hope, that climate change is a global problem, and the role of leading subnational governments to work together to act on solutions increasingly being recognized globally as an important thing that we all need to do. And BC collaborates with other Canadian provinces and the federal government as well. In fact, tomorrow, actually, I guess this afternoon now, I'll be participating in a summit in Quebec City where we have leaders and premiers from all across Canada who are going to be getting together to talk about climate action and what we're going to continue to do in Canada to make our mark on this global issue. Our discussions tomorrow, obviously, carbon pricing is going to be a major part of that discussion, and conversations with what we're doing in British Columbia, Alberta, Quebec, and then this morning announced Ontario with their systems. So it's something that Canada is definitely making a lot of changes and a lot of steps in, and it's great to see what's happening in parts of the United States as well. Canada's most populous province, as I was mentioning, Ontario, with their announcement, which is more of a cap-and-trade system, has them looking at their partnerships with California. So it's a different system than what we do in British Columbia. But I think the important message there is, what we're trying to say is it doesn't matter what system you look at, it's important that you identify the need for putting a price on carbon and what works for your jurisdiction. We also work across international borders. In particular, BC works closely with California, Oregon, and Washington, and we've actually created what's called the Pacific Coast Collaborative. In 2013, we actually signed this memorandum, this Pacific Coast Collaborative, with them, specifically to look at climate action and climate action policy. The action sets out a comprehensive strategy to combat climate change, promote clean energy in the region. Through this plan, the 4 jurisdictions agreed to account for all the costs of carbon and to link the programs where feasible to create consistency and predictability for businesses and for families. When you look at the west coast of North America, it's about 53 million people. It actually brings forward about $2.8 trillion in GDP. And if it was considered one nation in that area, it would be considered the 5th largest economy collectively when you put that together. In addition to putting a price on carbon, all 4 signed on to this memorandum in the jurisdictions are working on 14 different actions in that area. And I think what's been really important of working collaboratively with them, and I think talking with the Senator earlier today, we're hoping that other states as well, people look at this and say, we can't do it alone. One of the benefits that we've found is that with this collaborative, it takes away a little bit of that maybe competitiveness, especially from the business sector. It makes it a fair playing field. And we've found that to be a real major point of moving our plans forward. So maybe, I know there's the experts here really around this at the table, so I don't want to take up too much more of your time because I think the questions and the discussion we'll have here is really going to get in maybe a little bit more of the nuts and bolts and maybe talk specifically about some of your issues. But I want to finish off by saying that really there are, and it's been proven, advantages to pricing carbon and having a carbon pricing system. The policy choices depend on the jurisdiction, as I was saying, and we leave it up to each jurisdiction to look at what works best for them. But what's been really encouraging is the fact that other jurisdictions recognize the importance of this. They're making strides and steps to move forward, to figure out what's right for them, to make their mark, and to help with this global problem that we're having. Like British Columbia, Massachusetts will need to find ways to look at their next steps as well for 2020 and beyond. And I'm excited about the fact that you're looking at doing that. I hope that BC's revenue-neutral carbon tax system can at least shed some light of what's worked for us. It can be a little bit of a system that you can look at, you can learn from, and I know we've had some discussions around ours, how we can look at making ours even better and learn from what we've done. So I hope that the leadership that we've had in British Columbia, what you've seen here in Massachusetts collectively, will continue to grow. It'll continue to spur more discussion right across the nation. I think I said earlier, with what's happening here in Massachusetts and what we're doing in British Columbia right on the other side of the continent, we've got everybody surrounded. So they don't have a choice but to look at what we're doing, to implement their own plans for what works for them. And hopefully what we're doing will just spread right across coast to coast. Those dots will connect and we'll have a straight line of carbon pricing right across our nation. So with that, I want to thank you for your time and for welcoming me again, and looking forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
What I'd like to do now is to very briefly introduce the panelists up here at the table, and then go down the row of panelists and have each one give a few opening remarks to
give some background on where they stand on this. So let me just go down the list of people joining Mike up here at the table. Maren Smith, who's the director of Clean Energy Canada and with Simon Fraser University. She's going to, by the way, have to leave at 2 p.m. to catch a plane, I believe. So if she sneaks out, it's not necessarily because she's offended by anything that others say here. Dr. Susanna Laaksonen-Craig, on my immediate right, is the head of Climate Action Secretariat in the British Columbia Ministry of Environment. Ross Beatty is the founder and chairman of the Pan American Silver Corporation and executive chairman of Altera Power Corporation. Professor Chris Knittel is the William Barton Rogers Professor of Energy Economics in the MIT Sloan School of Management. And then, last but not least, Senator Mike Barrett, who's the state senator from the 3rd Middlesex District of Massachusetts. I should add my senator, being from Lexington. So let me begin. Mike's given a very nice framing opening with his discussion of the tax in British Columbia. Let me turn next to Maren Smith and get some opening comments from her. Maren was directly involved in the political process leading to the adoption of British Columbia's carbon tax back in 2008. Looking back, in your view, the enabling factors that allowed passage in British Columbia, when there were so many attempts to pass something similar elsewhere, what was it about British Columbia's approach that succeeded where others are having trouble?
Okay, thanks. And first, I just wanted to say I'm really thrilled to be here. You know, MIT has a lot of cachet, even up in Canada, so it's exciting to actually be in the halls here. And secondly, you know, from the left coast to, I was trying to decide, is this the right coast or are you the other left coast? But it's great to be having a conversation about carbon pricing, which is such a big step forward and a big success in BC. So another thing I wanted to mention before I started is, just to be clear, this is not a sort of a fringe conversation. Last year, we added up how many countries in the world are pricing carbon and what is their GDP. And when you totaled it up, the total 42% of the globe's GDP, it has some form of carbon pricing. So the jurisdictions that represent 42% of our global GDP have some kind of carbon pricing. So this is not, you know, sort of a left-wing or fringy idea out there. This is pretty mainstream. By 2016, when 5 provinces of China and Chile come on board, over 50% of the GDP will have some kind of carbon pricing on it. So I really encourage you to get out there and do this quickly so you can be ahead of the curve. You can still be the first in the US that's got a carbon tax. So what happened in BC to make this work? I was thinking on that. It's a good question. So one, we have a very environmentally conscious population. You know, we have huge protected areas. We have really progressive legislation on endangered species and other things like that, water, et cetera. So the population was primed. They were really demanding climate leadership. But I should be clear, they were not demanding a carbon tax. They were demanding climate leadership. So that is the base that you have here in Massachusetts as well. So I think you're well positioned there. The second thing that really made it happen in BC was having a bold, visionary, courageous leader, and somebody who was willing to step out and do this, because in the time, 2007, it hadn't been done. Was it going to work? He was a bit of a policy wonk, a bit of a policy nerd as well. And so having met Senator Mike Barrett today and others, I think you're well positioned there as well.
There was a compliment in there.
And I think the utmost of Premier Gordon Campbell, who put this policy in place. So the third part of it was just good policy. It was designed well. So key components of that were the revenue neutrality that Mike Bernier alluded to. So basically the concept that we are going to tax the bad pollution and shift the taxes away from income. Everybody likes income. Nobody likes income taxes. Nobody likes corporate taxes if you're a business. So we're going to shift it over to tax the bad. That is a real different way of thinking. So even though this was different and change, that made sense to people, taxing the bad. When they got the check in the mail the first year, you know, $200 because of the tax system, they were going to be paying carbon tax and the income tax hadn't gone down yet. You know, it made it very real to people. And Ross can speak more about how that worked with the business community. So revenue neutrality was very important getting this policy in. Another piece was the fact that it was economy-wide. So everybody was paying it. Now, the value of that is that the public was involved, especially in the first year when you went to the gas pump, it said carbon tax. When you got your bill from the gas company, if you heated your home with gas, it had a line, the carbon tax. You saw carbon tax, you saw carbon tax. And you had a premier who kept saying, right, and if you're smart and you insulate your home, you're gonna make money. You're gonna be out ahead of this because of the revenue neutrality. So it was very visible, it engaged the public. And that helped build support because they could see climate action. Now, one thing I want to caution is that if you did polling in BC before the tax came in and said, who wants a carbon tax, nobody was actually putting up their hand and saying they wanted a carbon tax. So you're not going to get, the public wants climate leadership, and that's what's to focus on. But after the carbon tax came in, about a year after, 52% of the population supported the carbon tax. Now you show me another tax that you can get that kind of level of support for. By 2012, 65% of the population supported the carbon tax. And it has gone down since then, but that's, I don't know if Mike mentioned, it's been frozen, so there's not so much talk about it. But people like it because out of all the taxes, if you list taxes, they think that's the best tax. So I think those are a few things that set the stage for bringing the tax in. I can definitely talk more about it, but I really do encourage you to do it. The truth is those who take action first are going to be the ones who benefit. So one thing just to stress, why the support has continued with it is because it's working. So as Mike said, our fossil fuel consumption is down 17% more than the rest of Canada. Our greenhouse gas emissions are down twice the rate of the rest of Canada. And in addition, our clean tech sector has grown significantly. We have 13% of Canada's population. We have 22% of the clean tech sector in BC. It was not like that before we had the carbon tax in place. So now it's diversified our economy and it's continued to build the pride of people in BC. So does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. So we're going to switch to this end of the table. The plan, you'll notice, is we're trying to box in Mike Barrett for the ending here. And I'd like to ask Dr. Susanna Laxton-Craig to talk a little bit about the system and the policy that's in place. It's a relatively straightforward, it seems to be a relatively straightforward tax, but I'd like to know a little bit more about, for example, policies on low-income residents and so on.
Okay. So I think that a couple of those kind of key design principles that British Columbia government had when this was built have come up in various Secretary Bernier's notes and what Maren said. First of all, one key consideration was the revenue neutrality. Government did not want to do a tax grab, quote unquote. The money that is collected as carbon tax revenue gets recycled out through other tax reductions to both individuals and corporations. The other one was that George Shultz actually has called British Columbia's carbon tax as a textbook example how to implement a tax. We started low, as Secretary Bernier pointed out, at $10 a ton, and it allows then the economy to adjust to this gradually increasing rate of carbon tax, and that has been a key. The other key part was the certainty that it brought. Not only does carbon tax tell you exactly what you are paying, but it also then came with a schedule that showed the scheduled increase that were going to happen over a number of years, which created the kind of certainty that, for example, businesses craved. Then we wanted to have, as Meren pointed out, as broad base as possible, because if you think about the effectiveness of policy, carbon pricing policies, it really is about the stringency of the policy as well as the coverage of the policy. Then we get to the one piece you specifically asked, and it is about one of the key principles was to protect low-income individuals and families. And so a specific scheme was put into place where they receive a quarterly rebate checks. For a family of 4, it comes to about $300 a year. And while a few years into this, there is nowadays also a special rebate for northern and rural communities. It wasn't part of the original carbon tax introduced in 2008, but it was considered at the time, and Secretary Bernier, coming from those, and probably testify how his constituencies and individuals in those communities felt quite strongly about it. So there is also that kind of a additional rebate, which comes to about $200 a year.
Thank you very much. I'd like to turn next to Ross Beatty and look at an industry point of view. One of the main concerns surrounding carbon tax is that it might burden the local economy and undermine how businesses compete, particularly in the global marketplace. As a businessman who leads a energy-intensive mining operation both in Canada and globally, I'd be interested in getting your experience with this tax and how it's affected you as a businessman and your industry in particular.
Very good. Well, I want to welcome everybody as well, and thank you for your hospitality here. It's kind of fun to be in Massachusetts talking about something that's worked quite well in BC. I'm not sure if it's going to work here. It's a different world, different industry, different population, different everything. But it certainly has worked in BC. And at the outset, I'll say that no businessman likes to increase costs. I mean, taxes are bad, whether you're an individual or you're a company. They're not things that people just embrace and love. But you know, carbon is something that I think certainly by 2007, 2008, and more so today, is pretty much recognized as a pollutant. It's pretty much recognized as contributing to negative things in the world that actually affect everybody. It's a global problem, and yet every single person can be part of the solution. So a lot of companies get that. A lot of companies, of course, all companies are led by people, and people understand these things. And I think the more enlightened companies were on the page. They were looking for leadership from government because pollution is a cost to everybody, and yet nobody wants to pay a penalty for it if they're actually creating it, unless it's imposed on them. So you have to have a government that creates a cost to this externality, and that's what a carbon tax does. That's what a cap and trade system does. So business, I would say, understood the need to do this. And they were looking for the leadership, which they got. We got the program. And all of a sudden, when you have an increased cost in your business, you just kind of have to suck it up and embrace it. And then you have to do something about it. You want to try to reduce those costs through innovation. And that's where I think the other success of this tax has really been. It's created a tremendous amount of innovation that's based in Vancouver and local towns around British Columbia that has served to drive down costs in a truly sustainable way. If companies use less fossil fuel in their businesses, they save money, they save the tax, but more than anything, they save money for the long term. Putting a tax in place like the BC tax was enacted, it's a graduated increasing cost over time. It allows companies to plan for it. It's a simple tax. It's clearly calculated. You know exactly what the cost is going to be 10 or 20 years from now. And then you can start bringing the innovation in and the capital investment in to reduce it or even better eliminate it. So that's what's really bred the dynamism of the BC marketplace. Sure, there's going to be dinosaurs out there who just hate it and don't want to do anything about it and have their head in the sands and ignore carbon and don't say it's a problem. There's all those, you can't avoid those. But the enlightened people, the leaders, are going to embrace it and they're going to affect positive change. So that's what we're trying to do in our companies. One of my companies is a clean energy company. I figure that's a pretty good business right now. It's a long-term business that should succeed, making clean energy from solar, hydro, wind, and geothermal power. Long-term business that's going to survive. Trying to make innovations in the mining industry, making better use of hydrocarbons that we use, making lower diesel emissions. It's not just good for the bottom line. It saves us insurance. It saves us air quality, health, the health and safety of our workers. So there's all sorts of spin-off benefits that come out of this. And if I look as a general business person in British Columbia, you know, I can look to real costs from carbon pollution. I can look at increased insurance premiums, tremendous devastation from insect outbreaks in our forestry industry, all sorts of things that come from the kind of catastrophic climate conditions that are happening. We've got a devastated ski industry this year because we have no snow. It's been really, really warm this winter in British Columbia. Sorry about that. And so there's just all sorts of real business costs that truly can be avoided if we all get together and try to solve the problem. So we're all part of this solution. I think a lot of business people feel good about it. If they can drive their total costs down, they make more money at it. They don't have to pay the tax, and it's a win-win. The other thing that's come out of this tax is lower corporate income tax. Every single company in British Columbia has lower corporate income taxes as the offset, making the carbon tax a revenue-neutral tax. Up with the carbon tax, down with the corporate taxes, and down with personal income taxes, to the point that right now British Columbia has the lowest corporate taxes for industry in the G7. And that's pretty cool.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So, Chris, let me turn to you next. We've heard a number of positive stories about the British Columbia carbon tax. I'd be interested in your views as an economist comparing a carbon tax with other possible policy instruments. In the U.S., I think many states have adopted renewable portfolio standards as an alternative to a tax. Could you comment on these different policy vehicles seen from the lens of economics?
Sure. So there's a bit of irony here because at least one of the reasons why economists have a bad reputation is that you often hear economists never agree on anything. The joke I've heard is if you line up 100 economists head to toe, they'll all be pointing in different directions. But there's one issue which economists do agree, and that is what is the most efficient way to reduce the demand for something, and that's to raise the price. So on the one issue we all agree, everyone ignores us. So that's, I don't know whether there's a chicken and egg issue here, but I think we might continue going along disagreeing just so at least one of us is right every once in a while. So the way to think about it is that pollution is just like a product. Right now, the cost of emitting CO2 in the atmosphere is zero. So just like the most efficient way to reduce the demand for something is to raise its price, the most efficient way to reduce pollution is to raise its price as well. And in at least 50% of GDP worldwide pays a zero price for CO2. So of course you're going to have an inefficient amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. And so the next question is, how do we put a price on it? And there are really two mechanisms that you could go about doing that. One is a carbon tax, the other is a cap and trade system. And reasonable economists can disagree as to which is the better system. My personal belief is, for a host of reasons that I hope we get into at some point, I personally prefer a carbon tax over a cap and trade system. But either one is a great starting point, and California recently adopted a cap and trade system that seems to be functioning pretty well. British Columbia's carbon tax is obviously doing very well. So we don't rely on carbon pricing in the U.S. to a large degree. So what we do rely on instead are a host of these other policies that are really, you know, in a word, very inefficient. In two words, I guess. So we have CAFE standards, corporate average fuel economy standards, For vehicles, we have the renewable fuel standard that incentivizes ethanol. On the electricity side, we have renewable portfolio standards. We have direct and indirect subsidies for renewables. The Obama administration recently announced the Clean Power Plan, which is going to, again, phase out CO2 emissions from these sectors. These are fine, I guess, although I will say that a large economics literature has shown that absent a carbon price, many of these policies actually do more harm than good. Not necessarily in terms of the environment. They might reduce CO2 emissions, but the cost of those reductions well exceed the social cost of an extra ton of CO2 in the atmosphere. So some research that I've done suggests that policies like a low carbon fuel standard or the renewable fuel standard, society ends up paying $80 for every ton of CO2 reduced. Whereas the federal number that we use in the US for the benefit of reductions is $37 to $42. So you're paying $80 for something that you value at $40. And I think most economists would agree that's a bad policy. And the key is that these other policies often lead to very negative unintended consequences, whether it's CAFE standards that put me in a more fuel-efficient vehicle. Well, now I'm driving a more fuel-efficient vehicle, so of course I'm going to drive it more, right? It's cheaper for me to drive now. So that's known as rebound, and that's the case for LED light bulbs, for more efficient furnaces. Anytime you increase the efficiency of a product without raising the price of using that product, you're going to use it more. And that's going to lead to either reversing some of the emission reductions coming from the efficiency, or in the case of CAFE standards where you're driving more, it now takes me 45 minutes to go from Lexington to Cambridge because there's greater congestion, there's greater accidents. So a lot of these alternative policies lead to these unintended consequences that are often ignored. And a carbon tax, the beauty of a carbon tax or a cap and trade system is the unintended consequences are actually good. There are things like you drive less, so there's less congestion, there's less traffic, there's less accidents. You use your product more efficiently. You turn the thermostat down in the winter, up in the summer. You have an incentive to innovate on greenhouse gas polluting technologies. You have an incentive to scrap the old inefficient vehicles quicker. And those lead to lower criteria pollutant emissions because the old vehicles tend to be dirtier for local pollution as well. So this, economics is known as the dismal science and is often very frustrating. This is one of the most frustrating parts of my job is that, we've known how to do this since 1920, in fact. There was a famous paper by Pagoo in 1920 that showed the most efficient way to reduce an externality or pollution is to put a price on it. So I guess we have 5 more years to finally get that policy done within the first century of that paper. And my hope is, Mike keeps telling me that we're 3 years away, and he's promised that we're 3 years away in Massachusetts. So, and let's at least do it by 2020 so that we can go within the first 100 years of our knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. So, Chris, remind me, what was your license plate number when you lived in California?
My license plate right now is tax CO2. Yeah.
So you got it in Massachusetts. So I'd like to turn now to Senator Barrett, you have made passing legislation on a carbon price one of your top priorities this session. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the nature of that policy, the revenue you expect to generate, where it goes, and what lessons have you learned from British Columbia that are guiding you in putting this together?
Thank you very much. We've learned, by the way, a great deal from BC, so it's an enormous pleasure for me to be here with folks from British Columbia. As it happens, every morning when I'm walking my dog, I pass Chris Knittel standing at the bus stop with his son and his dog, and that's when we plot a carbon fee for Massachusetts. it's terrific to be here because MIT really is a community, and I know that you're throwing around these ideas at every level. I know that you've set very ambitious objectives for yourself as a true community internal to this campus. I know that you're setting goals for yourselves as individuals when you come out to communities of the sort that I represent when you come home at night to your families. I'm incredibly impressed. You're really setting the pace for other universities and for other nonprofits. As it happens, while I'm new to the Senate, I served 20 years earlier, and I have another debt to MIT that I owe in addition to the model you set for working together. Way back in the day, there was a glimmer of fee and rebate. The first discussions that led to the wonderful work that British Columbia has done were being held, and a professor, now a professor emeritus of yours, David Gordon Wilson, was really in on the ground floor, and I noticed that Professor Wilson is here, and I never thanked you for giving me that idea 20 years ago, so thank you now, Professor. So the core idea the core example is the example set by British Columbia. The core idea here is that, as Chris said so eloquently, there should be a complete price for any given product, one that reflects labor, materials, and a little bit for profit or for surplus revenue. And the prices for fossil fuels in Massachusetts are simply an underprice. And they've always been that way because all the downstream stuff, the particulates in the air, because pollution is so intimately related, the infrastructure effects on the climatological side, all those downstream effects of my burning a gallon of gasoline aren't captured in the price. And Chris is right, for a century now, economists have been driven crazy because this is a true market failure. The regular model doesn't work. And what we're trying to do by setting a price is to capture the downstream effects that come just as intimately from using a gallon of gasoline as the upstream effects of drilling for the stuff, exploring for the stuff, refining the stuff, transporting it, and retailing it. We're not trying to add to the price for its own sake. We're trying to right price. We're trying to get a complete cost. Now, in Massachusetts, we too believe in revenue neutrality because we've heard from both the left and the right in our very diverse state. The left is very concerned about the regressive impact of fees that one might collect from fossil fuel use uncorrected for income. So if you want to begin to make sure that people of limited means don't pay too much in order to fight climate change, make sure you rebate the money back to them in a progressive way. We've crunched a lot of numbers. We figured out how to make sure that the poorest quintile in Massachusetts, the poorest 20%, pays less of the carbon fee than the richest quintile, the richest 20%. We think we've got a progressive way of sending this money back to households who pay it. And on the business side, we thought a lot about you. We considered rebating the fees collected from large-scale organizations through the corporate income tax system because it's efficient. The Department of Revenue already has names and addresses, corporate names and addresses on file. And we found out, of course, that nonprofit institutions of higher learning and hospitals do not pay a corporate excise tax. So we can't use the tax system, and instead, we hit on a data file that permits us to simply take note of the total number in your workforce. Whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, we propose to rebate the money collected from the organizational and business side in terms of fees back in terms of total number by, I should say, proportionally by head count, number of employees you have. So we've given a lot of thought to being inclusive on the business side and progressive on the personal side. Let me take note as well of the fact that we do have a Republican governor. He and the Speaker of our Massachusetts House have taken a no new tax pledge. We've drafted this bill so that legally, constitutionally, it is not a tax. We're not talking here about semantics. There's a three-pronged test for determining something that's a tax in Massachusetts, according to cases of the Supreme Judicial Court. And the most important of the three tests is, are the revenues committed to the general operations of government? In this case, we collect fees, we segregate them in a standalone fund, and we rebate them back to you. And in so doing, the monies don't go to support the general operations of government. This is not constitutionally a tax. It is a fee that Governor Baker, with his No New Taxes pledge, can conscientiously and completely support. It's critical to take note of the political reality that we're a two-party state and that we must get the support of the business community, of conservatives, of Republicans, and of the governor himself. This can do that, and he can do it without breaking any tax pledge. I dare say, it's just a political observation, that if he were to move out front, put Massachusetts on the map, make us the first state to adopt a carbon fee, he would get the support of independents and a great many Democrats when he ran for re-election. This is exactly his opportunity to do what Mitt Romney did with health care for all, what a president did, Nixon did, in going to China. This is his moment to completely take over and win accolades from the whole of the Massachusetts political system if he wishes. You know, I had some other things I was going to say, but I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yeah. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to the audience for questions. We have two microphones here in either of the aisles. If you queue up, we'll alternate between the two rows here. Yes.
My question is about carbon offset and what technologies are being certified as valid for carbon offset credits, and specifically whether or not the technology of using biochar, charcoal, sequestered in agricultural soils is among them.
I assume it's for us, right?
Yes.
We have about 20 different carbon offset protocols currently in British Columbia. It's a very diverse one, from forest carbon offsets for all kinds of, for example, reducing fugitive emissions in upstream natural gas development. I have to say that I don't believe there's specifically one for biochar. There are opportunities. We have companies who are developing biocoal. And so we are looking at that right now. So those opportunities exist, and we have always said in British Columbia that you bring a good idea to us, we are open to develop a offset protocol if we can then prove the additionality to that.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi there, my name's Ron Kohler. I'm from Ashfield, Massachusetts, in the western part of the state. Thank you very much for coming all the way from BC to us here, and Senator, thank you very much for having and being here also. It just occurs to me, one thing is that all of the Canadians talk taxes, and all of the Massachusetts people try to stay away from the word because it's not a very popular subject. And in this state, we have two bills that approach carbon. One is, they're both in concept fee and dividend, but the Pacheco bill is 80% return versus the Barrett bill, which is 100 revenue neutral. And my only fear is that these two bills will divide the people. It would be really wonderful if for some way the two senators could get together, commit the first 15 years to revenue neutral, and then after that go with a different type that perhaps Pacheco's talking about. And I was wondering if you, Senator, could address that perhaps. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a terrific question. Mark Pacheco and I are close, so we discuss this all the time. Here's my problem is simply one of realpolitik. We do, in fact, have a Republican governor who would not be comfortable committing to a initiative that's revenue neutral today, but promises a tax in the future. I think that's a non-starter. Now, he wasn't my candidate for the office. I'm a Democrat and a progressive one, but he won fair and square. There's no way to argue that result away. I think revenue positive is inoperative insofar as we have the current Speaker of the Massachusetts House in office and the current governor in office. Typically, Massachusetts governors, you know, they often have an 8-year run. This is the first year of that 8 years. I want a carbon tax within that 8-year time frame. That means revenue neutral.
Thank you.
Yes. My name is Martin Heyman. I'm from Newton. And my question is, how did you arrive at a $10 starting point or a $40 finishing point? And how do you determine the number of tons entering the state at the outset? Thank you.
Yeah, yes, I think it's yours because...
Well, I'll tell you one of the lessons, and we really did draw many from the British Columbia experience, is that one must start modestly. I'm involved with a number of progressive issues in the state. I'm interested myself in a graduated income tax. I've seen some polling recently on public attitudes toward tax or fee increases that are not revenue neutral, and I can tell you we face a problem not only with our Republican chief executive. At the moment, we face a problem with a public mistrustful of politicians and unwilling to pay net a new fee or a new tax to support government operations. I wish the polling numbers were not so daunting, but they are. And so as a consequence, you know, once again, we're going with a very low approach, beginning at $10, which is what you did in BC. We do scale it up, $5 per metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent every year. BC tops out at the moment at $30 because they're waiting for the rest of us to catch up, as they should. Our bill would have Massachusetts go over the next 7 years to $40 per metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. So we would meet you at year 5 and hope you to join us at moving up a tier or 2. But we started low because British Columbia's experience is you really need to build confidence. The public does not believe, of course, in revenue neutrality. They don't think government will keep its promise. It's the business community that believes it, that is willing to believe it, and to take it on faith that you will be a legislature and a governor at your word. So it's the business community that in the beginning invests its faith in revenue neutrality. The public, once it gets the first rebate check, can join in. And at that point realize that you will mean what you say. We can fight climate change more aggressively than any other state in the United States if we were willing to make a few compromises, and starting small and revenue neutrality are 2 of those.
Chris, you had a comment, I believe.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add that from an economic standpoint, there is a right number, and that right number is the social damage from an extra ton in the atmosphere. And the U.S. federal government, at least, now has a number on the books that's $42 a ton that they use for cost-benefit analysis for other policies. So, and as the globe keeps getting warmer and warmer as time goes on, that number is going to keep going up. But hopefully at some point, the 2 cross, and the tax is equal to that social damage.
Good, thank you. Yes.
Yes, Doug Martinshaw, another Westerner. This is to Chris, and I'd just like more information about what the fee would be on businesses, and I think I read something that there would be a fee for businesses having a certain number of people, and how would that be for below, for the smaller businesses, maybe just employing 5, 10 people?
One of the fascinating things about carbon pricing in a knowledge-based economy like Massachusetts is that businesses, for the most part, are not disproportionately burdened. We have relatively few energy-intensive large employers, although I will note that because you guys keep a lot of buildings heated and lit of necessity, during dark winters, that educational institutions are among those who will pay their fair share. So what we would propose to do here is to give you a rebate check and to challenge you to a game that MIT, I know, could play brilliantly. You have the money in hand, and by the way, we don't have to wait 12 months to rebate your fees paid over the course of a year. We can estimate how much an institution like this one, for example, would pay, or any small business, large or small. We can rebate it in the beginning of a 12-month cycle, and then you've got your cash in hand, and you can say to yourselves, how can we as a community manage to pay less in fees than we've just been rebated, so that we can wind up, relative to other large institutions, in a cash positive position. That's the kind of math that I can tell you families who watch daytime TV, and I happen to be an occasional watcher of daytime TV because I exercise during the day, he says. And everyone understands when you've got a sum of money in a daytime quiz show that you can wind up a net loser or you can wind up adding to the stash. And our challenge to families and to organizations, again, large and small, is here's the rebate, add to the stash by going green and by letting somebody who has chosen not to subsidize the size of your pot.
So could I ask the same question to the British Columbia group? How different industries are treated? We heard a little bit about small businesses. How about knowledge industries, so universities, versus the large energy-intensive mining industry that we heard about earlier?
Well, okay, go ahead. I'll just, and you can continue that, Secretary. It's just how the carbon tax works. It's not a kind of sectoral approach. Anybody who uses, consumes the fuel in British Columbia pays the tax on that. So one of the key principles that Premier Campbell was very, very clear from early on was that there were no exceptions to this. Everybody paid, because as soon as you start to crack that door open and start to allow those exemptions to happen, somebody else is there knocking at the door. So that has not been the route that we have taken so far. So it has more that these kind of like rebates have happened on the personal, individual side. We have some programs that we, for example, announced in this year's budget to kind of mitigate influences like that. Cement industry has been one of those industries in British Columbia that has been very, very affected. Emission intense, trade exposed industry. But instead of government saying that, okay, we exempt you from carbon tax, we have now a 5-year program where we work with them to incentivize them to look at alternate fuels for themselves, find other alternative ways for them to reduce their emissions. So those have been rather the mechanisms than clear exemptions of the tax.
Yeah. And the only thing I'll add, maybe quickly, I see quite a few speakers, I want to take time away, or questions, but from a business perspective, industry, especially industry that wants to be successful, thinks long term. So when you look at the carbon tax when we implemented it, what it instantly did was forced businesses to look at that long-term part of their portfolio. What do I have to spend now to save money in the long term? And we started seeing that even in the educational component in schools and hospitals and everywhere else. They started looking at this because, a city hall or a place is not going to retire. That's not their goal, is not to save up money, retire, and then sell. They're going to be there in perpetuity to help our kids. So it's easier to justify from an economic standpoint the investment up front, knowing that you're going to get that money paid back over the long term of your industry or your business.
We do actually have we have to get better at coordinating who is going to say what. So we do actually, in terms of, because we have carbon neutral government, which includes the larger public sector, including, for example, therefore, schools, secondary institutions, and so on. So we do have a capital program for them where they can get access to capital that they can make further investments in the infrastructure, for example, to reduce their energy cost, energy efficiency, and things like that.
Next question.
Okay. Hi. David Hyman from Jamaica Plain in Massachusetts. Question for the Secretary. It relates, though, to how Massachusetts, especially the legislature and the state, can relate to, quote, other entities. Like British Columbia is quite good in this regard, but let's say the federal Prime Minister Harper might not as much on board, maybe I'll put it that way. And I mean, I don't know about the other provinces, but I wonder about the ones that are in between Ontario and British Columbia. So how do you relate to those other entities in trying to get this across?
Yeah. Well, I really want to appreciate your subtle approach there in some of your comments. You know, it's a valid point. First of all, from a provincial standpoint, we have the luxury as a province to set our own standards, to be able to put these through legislation as we did. As we said in the onset, one of the biggest things for us is, yes, we were the leaders, yes, we came forward, but we've also put the challenge out to every other jurisdiction, everybody else around us. When I look at the provinces that are close by, I think a bit of that competitiveness nature starts to build in, and some provinces are going to have a harder time than others to reach the level that we're at. But I think what's important is that, and I'll be in Quebec tomorrow speaking to all the premiers of Canada, and what gives me some optimism out of that is they are all recognizing that we need to do something. In British Columbia, we've chosen what our something is. Quebec and Ontario have now decided what theirs is. And so it's kind of sandwiched a few other provinces around recognizing they have to look at something as well. We are hearing from them, from Saskatchewan, Alberta, that they recognize that they need to step up. They have plans in place. They've got a climate action plan as well they're looking at implementing. Alberta's getting ready to go through an election, so we're looking forward to seeing after that election how they might try to push forward some of those. But I think a lot of it's kind of like growing up as a kid. A lot of it we're working on peer pressure.
In the federal government?
Well, the federal government has different approaches. Right now, it's provincially, we look at it. The federal government has not signaled that they're willing to put out a carbon tax or something to that nature yet. There has been discussions. They've kind of talked about the fact that maybe we need to look at it, but they haven't formally said anything to the best of my knowledge. Do you have?
No, federal government has been proponent rather like a regulatory sectoral approach to this, but we of course also have a federal election this coming fall in Canada, so you know I think that that's going to drive a whole lot what the national level carbon pricing will look like in Canada.
Good. So the next question, over here.
Hi, I'm Henrietta Davis. I'm the former mayor of the city of Cambridge. Welcome to Cambridge, and welcome, Senator. Welcome back. I'm happy to be here today and to hear you all and welcome you to Cambridge and to MIT, the MIT campus. What a great place to be. The city of Cambridge is one of many cities across the country and across the world that are taking leadership locally on climate. And in this country in particular, it's been very important for cities to take leadership. And of course, we have Massachusetts where we have fantastic leadership as well. So my question is really this. We in Cambridge have, I tried to make it really short. In Cambridge, we are just about to release a net zero strategy and plan for carbon net zero, actually 70% reduction by 2040, 80% by 2050, with the assistance of a consultant from British Columbia. Big surprise. So one part of what we were discussing was a fee and rebate system on the local level. And those of us who know that taxes in Massachusetts are the purview of the state wonder how locally are we going to be able to do anything if the state is, in the unlikely event that the state is unlikely to take action. Is there a way that we can take action locally? There are 130, 140 cities and towns in Massachusetts that are green communities and are committed to doing many of these things. Is there a way to drive the action to a local level?
So legally and constitutionally, absolutely yes. The legislature, in the relatively recent past, Henrietta, and by the way, it's wonderful to see you, has adopted a local option hotel motel tax. So we can give localities the option of going above a state baseline. It would be terrific to see communities, and this is one thing I've been very impressed by with respect to our British Columbian visitors today, is they have talked about municipal action. Mike is a former mayor of Dawson Creek in British Columbia. So the municipal piece is critical. I would love to see city and town governments adopt resolutions urging carbon pricing, and consider making requests for carve-outs so that they could pave the way. I don't view that as competitive. I think it reinforces the message. We should go statewide. We really need to go nationwide. But why not start in Cambridge? Why not start in Massachusetts?
I think we could do that. What do you think? Start in Cambridge? Thank you.
Maybe just quickly what I'll add to that too is, as I mentioned, this is something we need to do together. Local government, municipalities, where your best value is doing the work up front. Because what we found at the provincial level or at a state level, if the citizens are demanding it, if local government's demanding it, if business is demanding it, it makes it so much easier to get approval, to get implementation, to move a bill or to move an act forward. So great to hear, Cambridge, what you've been doing. In Dawson Creek, I mentioned that we had this climate action charter where every municipality in our province was signing on to that. About 93% of them signed on to the charter. And we put that right at the very beginning as part of our climate action plan. The city I was part of, we realized we wanted to go one step further. So after the carbon tax was announced in the province of British Columbia, the city, while I was mayor, we introduced a second carbon tax imposed on ourselves to force us to actually take it one step further. So we actually went out in our city when I was the mayor, and we said, not only are we going to be paying the carbon tax to the province, we're going to pay carbon tax to ourselves. And we actually put a line item in our municipal budget that says personal carbon tax. We kept track of our carbon emissions that we were putting out. We taxed ourselves $100 per ton. Wow. And we put it actually into a locally dedicated fund where local businesses, local entrepreneurs, and the municipality could then tap into that fund, provided it was going specifically to a green project that would reduce carbon emissions. And it's been amazingly successful. So there's another idea.
Yes.
I know that one of the sciences or industry that's being developed here at MIT is algal biofuel, and I believe that that has a role in carbon reduction, and so I understand there are two people from the industry, but it'd be possible to get a comment.
Want to speak to that?
Maybe, Chris, you can then pick up, what is there. But so in British Columbia, we have recognized that biofuels are part of that. And so, for example, if you have 100% ethanol as a fuel, there is no carbon tax on that. And so there have been various programs, even through federal government that has, for example, incentive looking at biofuel opportunities and so on. And I think that it was Maren who noted earlier, or maybe it is in Secretary's speech, that we actually do have, for example, low carbon, renewable and low carbon fuel standards in place. So those are also kind of those additional tools and mechanisms that rest on that foundational piece that carbon tax is.
Just quickly, what I'll throw in with that question too, one of our friends with the BC delegation that came here is Michael Whedon from Pacific Bioenergy, and he would actually be an amazing source of information on that specific topic as well, who's here with us. Yeah, just threw his hand up.
Just very quickly, it is important to distinguish across biofuels. Biofuels are not created equally. The U.S. consumes about 15 billion gallons of corn-based ethanol per year. The Renewable Fuel Standard's been trying to push second-generation cellulosic ethanol, but it's failed. And I think the presence of corn-based ethanol makes it seem like we're doing something, but we're really not. Most estimates suggest corn-based ethanol is just a marginal benefit in terms of CO2 emissions, and at some point we need to need to get off the corn and get to
Yeah, I
either
just want to thank you for
algae
making that comment. I
or
typically work on sustainability and farming and agriculture issues, and it is not
pretty
all
complicated
sustainable
actually to do the carbon
corn
account.
ethanol product. But I just wanted to ask you another question about political reality.
Is likely to be one of the better sources, but again, you have to do the accounting correctly, and that's not sorted out yet in the science.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for making that comment. I typically work on sustainability and farming and agriculture issues, and it is not at all sustainable corn ethanol product. But I just wanted to ask you another question about political reality. Standing on this, and because I mean, it's pretty summers out near Tofino, and Victoria and I did make it up to Dawson Creek, and it's really far from Tofino to get up there, or even Victoria. So my question is more about the federal upcoming election and the reality of introducing carbon tax as an issue in the federal election. And, you know, I guess I'm assuming the leader of the Liberals is Justin Trudeau still, yes, I'm hoping. And I'm just wondering where he's sort of standing on this. And because, I mean, it's pretty clear people were very polite about it in a very Canadian kind of way, but that Stephen Harper is not going to be a champion of a carbon tax, I'm just assuming. So I'm just kind of wondering what the political reality of that is moving forward. And because on the issues that I work on, typically in Canada, you know, it'll be Quebec first, it'll be BC first, Ontario, maybe Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, but then it's always sort of Alberta with the oil and other industries that is the outlier.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and they'll have some different challenges. From the federal perspective, you know, I guess it's stay tuned. We have, as the political parties start to materialize their platforms and start putting them forward, you know, I'd hate to speak on behalf of the Conservative government, Stephen Harper government, because they haven't put any formal signals out there, but, you know, one can be hopeful. But let me just take it, let's say, to the province of BC, and I'm glad you realize how far away my riding is from Victoria. That's how big British Columbia is. The riding I represent is about 1,400 kilometers away from the capital, where I have to be 4 days a week. So, and my riding is the size of Massachusetts and 22,000 people. So, but the political realities quickly in our riding, what we've learned very quickly is this is a nonpartisan issue. We need to take politics out of carbon pricing. We need to realize that this is a global issue. People need to step up. People need to show leadership and realize however the pricing is going to look, we need to do something. Take the politics out of it. And at first, you know, in all fairness, when we put this forward in 2007 and 2008 in the province of British Columbia, there was some political backlash from the opposition. And Senator Barrett didn't mention it, but some would say almost ironically, the party I represent, the Liberal Party, is actually a right-of-center party, and we are the ones that implemented this. What we've quickly found is take the politics out of this and let's talk about what factually needs to be done. And so we've been successful in BC. It's no longer a political issue.
Interesting.
So we're going to have to wrap up because of the time. We'll do one more question. I'm glad to see all the questioners standing up because it shows all the interest in the community in this topic. So if we could have one last question, short question, and probably a short answer too. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shoshana Blink. I'm from Somerville, Massachusetts. And an issue I've been working on for a while is fossil fuel divestment. I know MIT had a whole discussion about that last week. I wasn't able to make it. I heard it was great. I'm curious, Senator Barrett, if you support that, the state level. I know that there's a couple bills right now, or one bill that's been there in the House for a while. And can we do those at the same time? Can we pass a state divestment bill and a state carbon tax? Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm curious about. And then I guess if there's any answer from, you know, Canada as well, and I know that there's probably a lot of supporters for that in BC.
I'll mention this is a political observation about Massachusetts, and it's a sad one. But one that probably needs to be conjured with. What I observe about legislative behavior here is that we muster up the energy to focus on a major question. We take one big step and then we leave it for 5 years. That's been true of healthcare reform, where we addressed access, but not cost containment. It tends to be the way politicians do things. They psychically devote and politically devote a certain amount of capital, and then they walk away and see how the public reacts. So the conundrum we face with respect to divestment on the state level, I'm not talking about divestment on college campuses at all, but at the state level, an interesting question is whether this particular legislature would do two dramatic things or would insist on doing one and leaving the other behind. To date, our decisions suggest that we would only do one and let the public digest it before doing the other, and that is, I don't need to tell you, problematical.
So
what do you find?
Well, I guess the quick answer is, obviously I don't want to get into your politics, but but let's just say, can anything be done? Of course. As I said, you need political will, you need people supporting, and it sure helps when the people are supporting and you hear that message. For a politician like myself, and I've been a politician over 10 years now, and when you have people below you that are marching and saying this needs to be done, guess what? It's a lot easier to get it done.
So before we wrap up, I'd like to invite Dan Gatti up to the stage. He's with the Massachusetts Campaign for a Clean Energy Future. Been very helpful in organizing this program. Dan.
Thank you, everybody. Let me start by a lot of thank yous for for the people who helped put this thing together. Certainly, thank you to MIT for giving us this spectacular location for this event. It couldn't have picked a better place. I want to thank Rebecca Morris of my organization, Climate Exchange, for putting together just a huge amount of work to make this happen. I can't call out all of my coalition partners. There are too many, which is a good problem to have, but let me also give a big thank you to Cindy Lupi of Clean Water Action. And then let me also give a big thank you to Senator Michael Barrett for his vision, for his courage, for his leadership on this issue. We wouldn't be here without him, and he inspires us all to work on this issue. Finally, let me also thank my wife, Ophelia, right there in the middle of the crowd. The Massachusetts Campaign for a Clean Energy Future is a project of a coalition of major environmental organizations, business associations, community groups, and civic organizations. We've joined together to call on the state of Massachusetts to take that biggest and most important step to address the global warming crisis by putting a price on carbon. I'm going to say just a few things about why I think this campaign is important and how you in this audience can get involved. I know a lot of people today, and actually let me just say one thing that really heartens me as I look at this crowd is how many familiar faces I see out here. I see the evidence of a building network of people who are really invested in this issue and are willing to drive all the way out from Western Massachusetts and go to event after event on this issue. It's great that we have such a committed core of people, and of course it's great to see so many new faces here as well. I know a lot of people are frustrated today with the state of climate policy in this country, especially in the United States Congress. But the truth of the matter is bold and innovative ideas to solve big environmental problems have never started in Washington, D.C. Big ideas like a carbon fee and rebate program require successful models at the state level to prove that the policy can work and to prove that the policy will be accepted by the public. And this is the state for big ideas. Massachusetts has led the nation time and time again on climate and energy policy under Republican governors and under Democratic governors. We're the state that passed the first binding limits on global warming pollution. Our Massachusetts leadership was critical in creating the first cap-and-trade program in this country, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And through the Global Warming Solutions Act, Massachusetts has adopted the most stringent emissions mandates in the country. Good ideas begin in Massachusetts. As we all know, it was the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court who first recognized the right of all Americans to marry the person that they love. And today, a little more than a decade later, marriage equality is well on its way to becoming the law of the land in the entire country. When the federal government decided that it was time to bring universal health care to all Americans, they based their policy model on a model that had been tested and proven here in Massachusetts. Ideas that begin here don't remain here. And of course, going back in our history, Massachusetts has had a critical role driving progressive movements, ranging from abolitionism to women's suffrage to the American Revolution itself. If we can do this here, if we can demonstrate that carbon pricing can be good for our economy and good for our environment, if we can show that carbon pricing doesn't have to come at the expense of the working class, of the middle class, if we can show that this is a critical step towards creating a clean energy future for our state, we can help change the conversation about climate policy, not just here in Massachusetts, but throughout the region, throughout the country, and eventually throughout the world.
That's not enough, certainly, to get a price on carbon. But, you know,
to make that happen, we're going to need a movement. And we need your help. I'm sure we have a ton of talented people who have all kinds of skills that can help us move forward with this campaign. But let me start out with 3 suggestions for how to get involved. First, we're doing educational events throughout this state to help inform and explain to people and activists how carbon pricing works and why carbon pricing is a critical step towards building a clean energy future. This is a complicated policy, and if you don't feel like you have it completely understood yet, you're not alone. So if you can help us plan a forum, if you can help be an ambassador to your community, hosting a house party, hosting an event at your church or your community group, or maybe your Democratic town committee, or maybe your Republican town committee, let us know and we'll help you put something together. And if you can't plan an event, at least come and attend one. Second, reach out to your policy leaders. My favorite quote about the importance of grassroots legislative advocacy comes from Barney Frank, who once said, "I pay attention to an issue when I hear 6 people from my district call me to tell me that they care about it." We need to create that network of activists throughout the state, people who we can count on to make those calls, to write those letters, to show up for lobby days, so that our legislators know that their constituents want climate leadership. If you're interested in helping us reach out to policy leaders, sign up with us back there, and we'll provide you with the information, we'll provide you with the talking points, we'll provide you with the training so that you can feel comfortable and confident talking to a policy leader. And I will say, you know, and I'm sure Senator Barrett here will agree with me that, you know, talking to a state legislator, it's not that intimidating. You know, these are ordinary folks, you know, and there's a lot of education that needs to happen. Don't feel like you need to have a master's degree in economics to be able to tell your legislator that carbon pricing is an important part of our state's climate future. No offense to you, Professor. Finally, here's one thing you can do right now. We're launching a petition to demonstrate to our leaders that there are thousands of residents here in Massachusetts who want to build a clean energy future and support carbon pricing. So if you support our campaign and you haven't already done it, right now I want you to go sign the petition. It's right over there. You can see Shira Roscoe right there in the white. We've got plenty of copies. I want you to go sign it. And don't stop there. I'm sure every person in this room knows at least 10 people who are worried about climate change and who with just a little bit of urging would be willing to sign a petition like this. So, you know, help us get out to those people. We've got a change.org petition so that you can share it on social media. We counted about 200 people in the room right now. each one of us were able to go and get 10 of our friends to sign it, that's 2,000 supporters, over 2,000 supporters of carbon pricing right here today.
That's not enough, certainly, to get a price on carbon, but you know what it is? It's a start. It's a start
at building the political power that we're going to need to be able to get this done. So sign up, join us, and let's create a clean energy future for our children and for all of our future generations. Thank you.
So once again, I'd like to thank all of our panelists from British Columbia, from Massachusetts, for a very interesting conversation.